My wife abandoned me over her best friend's lie, but when the truth came out, Morgan lost everything, and my ex was left destroyed. I'm 35 years old. I live in Denver, and about a year and a half ago, my marriage exploded in the stupidest and most devastating way you can imagine. All because my ex-wife's best friend decided to invent a massive lie about me, and my wife believed her instead of believing me. I know how it sounds, like some cheap soap opera drama, but I swear all of this happened exactly like this, and I still have trouble processing that a single person could do so much damage. I guess I should start from the beginning. When I met Addison like 7 years ago, because from the first moment I met Morgan, her best friend, I knew she was going to be a problem, but I never imagined to what extent. I met Addison at a work event. She worked in marketing and I was in software sales, and there was instant chemistry, you know? One of those connections where you feel like you already know the person even though you barely exchanged like 3 sentences. We dated for 2 years before getting engaged, and everything was perfect. I mean, we had our normal fights like any couple, but nothing serious, and I was convinced I was going to spend the rest of my life with her. The problem, and I should have taken this more seriously from the start, was Morgan. The first time I met her was like 2 weeks into dating Addison. The three of us went out for drinks, and Morgan basically spent the whole night trying to make me feel like I wasn't good enough for her best friend. She asked me super invasive questions about my work, how much I made, if I had real career plans, passive-aggressive comments about my clothes, my car, basically everything. Addison laughed and said, "That's just how Morgan was, that she was super protective but had a good heart, and I wanted to believe her because I was in love. So, I swallowed my reservations and tried to get along with her." For the next 2 years, Morgan was a constant and annoying presence in our relationship. Addison and she talked literally every day, sometimes several times a day, and Morgan always found ways to insert herself into our plans. If we planned a romantic dinner, Morgan suddenly had a crisis and needed Addison to go see her. If we went away for the weekend, Morgan sent like 50 messages about some drama in her life. I tried to talk to Addison about this several times, told her I felt like Morgan didn't respect our space as a couple, but Addison got defensive and told me that Morgan had been there for her during really difficult moments in her life, that they were like sisters, and that I had to understand that friendship was important. And look, I'm not one of those guys who wants to isolate their partner from their friends. Not at all. But there was something about Morgan that just made my hair stand on end. A manipulative vibe that I couldn't ignore but also couldn't prove. When we got engaged, I thought things would get better, that Morgan would finally accept that Addison and I were a serious unit, but it was exactly the opposite. Wedding planning became a nightmare because of Morgan. She wanted to have an opinion about absolutely everything, from the venue to the menu to the guest list, and every time I suggested something, Morgan found a way to make it seem like a terrible idea. But the moment I remember most, the one that should have made me cancel everything right there, was when Morgan demanded that she needed her own special walk down the aisle during the ceremony. Not as a normal maid of honor. No, she wanted a separate entrance, with her own music, as if she were the co-star of the wedding. I was like, "Are you kidding?" But Addison begged me to accept it, said it was super important for Morgan to feel included, and that if we didn't do this, Morgan was going to be sad all day at our wedding and ruin the photos. Seriously, those were her exact words. I gave in because I didn't want to fight 2 months before the wedding. But in retrospect, that was the moment when I should have put a definitive stop to this whole sick dynamic. The wedding was beautiful. I'm not going to lie, despite Morgan and her ridiculous special walk number, which lasted like a full 2 minutes with a song she chose herself, Addison looked amazing, and I was genuinely happy. The first months of marriage were good. We moved in together to a bigger apartment in downtown Denver. We established our routines. Everything seemed to be going well. Morgan continued to be a constant presence, but I had learned to tolerate her. I basically ignored her when she came to visit and went to another room or hung out with my own friends. The real hell started like 8 months after we got married, when Morgan's boyfriend, a guy named Zachary, who honestly seemed too good for her, finally got tired of her dramas and broke up with her. Morgan called Addison crying hysterically, saying she couldn't stay in the apartment she shared with Zachary, that she needed a place to stay for a few days while she found something new. You know where this is going, right? Those few days turned into weeks, and the weeks were turning into a full month. Morgan basically took possession of our apartment, left her stuff everywhere, used our kitchen at any hour, invited her own friends over without asking, and worst of all, constantly interrupted any private moment Addison and I tried to have. If we were watching a movie together in the living room, Morgan appeared and started talking about her problems. If we were cooking something special, Morgan complained that she didn't like that type of food and suggested ordering pizza. Once, and this made me so angry I almost exploded right there, Addison and I were having a serious conversation about our finances in our own bedroom, and Morgan just walked in without knocking to ask if she could borrow Addison's laptop. She didn't even apologize for interrupting, just stood there waiting until Addison gave her the laptop. I told Addison afterwards that this couldn't continue like this, that Morgan needed to find her own place already, and Addison agreed but said she didn't want to throw her out on the street when she was going through such a difficult time. At the end of the first month, I had reached my limit. Morgan wasn't making any real effort to find her own apartment. In fact, she seemed pretty comfortable living with us for free, eating our food, using our streaming services, basically being a permanent third wheel in our marriage. I had a very serious conversation with Addison, told her this had to end, that either Morgan left or I left, and to my surprise, Addison finally agreed. That night, Addison told Morgan she needed to move out before the weekend, that it had been enough time already and we needed our space back. Morgan put on a dramatic scene, cried, screamed that she couldn't believe her best friend was abandoning her when she needed her most, but in the end she packed her bags and went to stay with other friends. I thought we could finally get back to normal, but it turns out Morgan wasn't the type who forgets or forgives, and what came next was basically her nuclear revenge against me. Like 2 weeks passed after Morgan moved out, and things between Addison and me were improving. We could have conversations without interruptions. We could make plans without Morgan inviting herself. It was like remembering why we had gotten married in the first place. Morgan still talked to Addison on the phone, but I could notice that Addison was setting more boundaries. She didn't respond to every message immediately, didn't cancel our plans for Morgan's dramas. And then, one night, everything went to hell. Addison came home from work with a face I had never seen on her, like pale and with red eyes as if she had been crying. She asked me if I needed to tell her something, and I honestly had no idea what she was talking about. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me that Morgan had called her that afternoon, completely devastated, to tell her that she had seen me the previous weekend at a bar downtown, making out with another woman. I literally stood there with my mouth open. I couldn't process what I had just heard because it was such a ridiculous and obvious lie that I thought Addison would simply laugh and ask me what really happened. But no, she was serious. She was angry, and when I tried to explain to her that I hadn't been to any bar that weekend, that I had been home with her basically the whole time, except when I went to the supermarket on Sunday morning. She told me that Morgan had been very specific, that she said it was Saturday night at a bar called The Junction, that she clearly saw me with a blonde, that they were very affectionate. I told her that was impossible because Saturday night we had been watching movies at home. Didn't she remember? And she said that I had left around 9 saying I needed to buy something at the store. Technically, that was true. I had gone to a gas station because we ran out of milk, but I was out like 20 minutes max. Definitely not enough time to go to a bar and start making out with someone. I tried to reason with Addison, showed her the receipt from the gas station with the time and date, asked her to check my phone, my social media, whatever was necessary to prove that Morgan was lying, but she was completely closed off. She told me that Morgan had no reason to lie about something like this, that Morgan was her best friend and had always been honest with her, and that if Morgan said she saw me, then she saw me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I yelled at her that Morgan was obviously making this up because she was resentful about being kicked out of our apartment, that this was her way of getting revenge. But Addison yelled back that I was just trying to blame Morgan to cover up my infidelity. The argument got horrible. We said hurtful things, and in the end, Addison grabbed some things and went to sleep at her parents' house, saying she needed space to think. The next few days were absolute hell. Addison barely responded to my messages. When she did, it was super cold and distant, and I was losing my mind trying to find some way to prove my innocence. The problem was that you can't prove a negative, you know? You can't prove you didn't do something, especially when the person accusing you doesn't even have real evidence, just their word. I tried to talk to Morgan directly, sent her like 10 messages asking why she was doing this, telling her I knew she was lying, but she blocked me on everything. I asked mutual friends to talk to Addison, to explain to her that this made no sense. But Morgan had already gotten to them first, had already planted her version of the story, and many of them looked at me with distrust. It was like watching my social life crumble in real time. People I had been friends with for years suddenly treating me like I was a traitor and a liar. A week after the initial fight, Addison sent me a message saying she had talked to a lawyer and wanted a divorce. She didn't even have the courage to tell me in person or by phone. She did it by text message. I tried to call her immediately, but she didn't answer. I sent her like 20 messages begging her to meet so we could talk, but she only responded that there was nothing to talk about, that Morgan had told her more details about what she saw, that apparently this wasn't the first time she had seen me with that woman, that I had been an idiot to think I could get away with it. I was completely devastated. I wasn't just losing my marriage, I was losing it over something I never did, over a lie fabricated by a manipulative and vindictive person who had managed to convince my own wife that I was unfaithful. The powerlessness I felt during those months, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like being trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The divorce process was quick because I basically had no energy to fight. I was so emotionally exhausted that I just wanted it all to be over. Addison kept most of our stuff. I moved to a small apartment in a cheaper area of Denver and tried to rebuild my life while carrying this horrible reputation that Morgan had created for me. At work, some colleagues asked me what had happened with my marriage, and when I tried to explain that it had all been a misunderstanding, I could see in their faces that they didn't completely believe me. Morgan had done a perfect job destroying me, and the worst part was that I had absolutely no way to prove I was innocent. Like 2 months passed like that. 2 months of depression, of questioning everything, of wondering if I would ever be able to clear my name or if I was going to carry this label of cheater forever. And then, out of nowhere, I received a message from a girl named Gabrielle. I didn't know her well. She was Morgan's friend. I had seen them together a couple times at parties, but we had never had a real conversation. Her message said she needed to talk to me about something important related to Morgan and my divorce, and that she had information I needed to see. Honestly, I thought it was some kind of trap, that Morgan had sent her to get more ammunition against me or something. But Gabrielle insisted it was urgent and that what she had to show me would change everything. I agreed to meet her at a public coffee shop because I didn't trust anyone at that point, and when I arrived, Gabrielle looked nervous, like she was doing something she knew was going to have consequences. I sat across from her and asked her directly what was so important, and Gabrielle took out her phone, searched for something for a few seconds, and then passed it to me, saying, "You need to see this." On the screen was a text message conversation between Morgan and another friend, and I started reading. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Literally, my hands started shaking. In the messages, dated 2 days after Morgan moved out of our apartment, Morgan was telling this friend that she was going to get revenge on me for kicking her out, that she was going to make up a story about seeing me with another woman, that Addison would believe her because she always believed everything, and that I was going to pay for humiliating her. The friend asked her if she was sure about doing that it seemed very extreme, and Morgan responded that I deserved it, that I had always been a jerk to her, that Addison deserved someone better anyway. There were more messages, several more, where Morgan elaborated the details of her lie, decided what bar she was going to say, what night, how she was going to make it sound convincing. I looked up at Gabrielle and asked her why she was showing me this. Why now? And she told me she had felt bad since she found out about the divorce, but was afraid to get involved because Morgan was vindictive and she didn't want to become her next target. But she had been. Thinking about this for weeks, couldn't sleep well knowing that a marriage had been destroyed by a lie and that she had the proof. So she finally decided to do the right thing, regardless of the consequences. I asked her if I could take screenshots of those messages, and she said she had already done it, that she was going to send them all to me right now. I received like 15 screenshots, all clearly showing the conversation between Morgan and her friend, with dates and times that proved without any doubt that the whole story had been fabricated from the beginning. I don't know how to describe what I felt in that moment. It was a mixture of relief, rage, sadness, vindication, all at the same time. I finally had the proof I needed, the proof I had been desperately searching for during months, but the damage was already done. My marriage was already destroyed. My reputation was already ruined. I thanked Gabrielle like 1,000 times, told her she had no idea how much this meant to me, and she told me she hoped this would help fix things somehow. I left the coffee shop straight to my apartment and sent Addison a message saying I needed to see her urgently, that I had something to show her that changed absolutely everything. She didn't respond immediately, took like 3 hours, but finally agreed to see us the next day at a Starbucks near her work. When I arrived at Starbucks, Addison was already there. She looked tired and sad, and honestly, part of me still loved her despite everything. But another part was so angry about what she had done, for believing Morgan instead of me, for not trusting in our marriage. I sat across from her, and without saying anything, I passed her my phone, with the screenshots open. I told her, "Read this, read everything." She started reading, and I could see how her expression changed from confusion to shock to absolute horror. She read every message, scrolled up and down several times as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing, and, when she finished, she just started crying. She covered her face with her hands and cried like I had never seen her cry. And I just sat there, not knowing what to do or say because, yes, this vindicated me. But it also meant that her best friend, the person she trusted most in the world besides me, had betrayed her in the most horrible way possible. Addison kept repeating, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did this. How could I be so stupid?" And I told her she wasn't stupid, that Morgan had been extremely manipulative and had exploited her trust, but that yes, it had hurt me deeply that she didn't believe me, that she chose Morgan's word over mine when I had never given her any reason to doubt me. She said she wanted to fix this, that she would do whatever was necessary, that we would go to therapy, that she would apologize to me every day for the rest of her life, that we would cancel the divorce and start over. And I sat there, looking at her. This woman I had married, with whom I had planned to have children and grow old together, and I realized that something fundamental had broken that couldn't be repaired. I told her I couldn't do it, that the damage was too deep, that every time I looked at her I was going to remember those months of hell. I was going to remember how I felt when the person who's supposed to know me better than anyone thought I was capable of betraying her like that. She begged me to reconsider, said she understood my pain, but that if we really loved each other, we could overcome this. But I had already made my decision. I told her I hoped she would find peace and happiness eventually, but that it wasn't going to be with me, that I needed to move forward with someone who would trust me unconditionally. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us crying, and then I got up and left. It was one of the hardest things I've done in my life. Walking out of that Starbucks knowing I was closing that chapter definitively, but I also knew it was the right thing for me. What came after was pretty satisfying in a certain twisted sense. I'm not going to lie. I shared the screenshots with several mutual friends, the same ones who had turned their backs on me when Morgan's story came out, and all of them without exception sent me apology messages, telling me they had been terrible to judge me without hearing my side, that they were ashamed. A friend named Caroline, who had been especially cold to me during all this time, called me crying to apologize and told me she was also going to share the messages with the whole social circle so everyone would know the truth. Within days, Morgan basically became a social pariah. Nobody wanted to be around her. People confronted her at parties and events, and according to Caroline, Morgan started posting things on social media about how everyone had betrayed her, and she was the real victim. The consequences for Morgan went beyond just losing friends. She worked in human resources for a mid-sized company in Denver, and apparently the reputation of what she had done reached her work too, because there was some related drama where her colleagues started questioning her character and judgment, and eventually they fired her. I don't know all the exact details, but Caroline kept me informed because she knew I wanted to know that Morgan was paying for what she did. Morgan tried to reach out to Addison looking for support, but by that time, Addison was so devastated by the betrayal that she basically told her she never wanted to see or talk to her again in her life. According to Caroline, Morgan yelled at Addison that she was a bad friend, that after everything Morgan had done for her over the years, Addison was abandoning her for a man who obviously didn't love her enough to give her a second chance. I mean, the audacity of this woman. Even after being exposed, she was still trying to manipulate the situation to make herself the victim. Addison ended up moving back in with her parents because she couldn't afford the apartment where she had been staying alone, and her mom, who I never particularly liked but who was always fair, apparently gave her a good scolding about how she had handled the whole situation. Caroline told me that Addison's mom was furious that her daughter had thrown away her marriage over the lies of a toxic friend, and that Addison was going through a pretty serious depression trying to process everything. Part of me felt sorry for her, because she was also a victim of Morgan in a certain sense, but another part, the part that had suffered for months while she rejected me and treated me like trash, couldn't feel too much compassion. The divorce was finalized like 6 months ago. I signed the papers without fighting for anything because, honestly, I just wanted to close this chapter and move forward. I've been focusing on my work, on rebuilding my friendships, on going to therapy to process everything that happened. I went on a couple dates, but nothing serious yet. I think I need more time before I can trust someone that way again. What's hardest for me is the feeling of lost years. You know, I was so sure that Addison and I were going to be together forever. We had plans, we wanted to buy a house, have kids, and all of that evaporated because of the petty revenge of one horrible person. And the last update I had about Morgan was like 2 months ago. Caroline wrote me to tell me that Morgan had left Denver completely, that apparently she moved to another city to start over because her reputation here was completely destroyed. I don't know where she is now, and honestly, I don't care. The only thing that matters is that she can't hurt more people I know. Sometimes I think about how my life would have been if Morgan had never existed, if Addison and I could have had our marriage without that toxic influence constantly poisoning everything. But I guess there's no point in thinking about that. What happened already happened, and there's no way to change it. The only good thing that came out of all this, if I can call it that, is that I learned a lot about myself and about the type of relationship I want in the future. I need to be with someone who trusts me, even when things look bad, someone who gives me the benefit of the doubt, someone who values our relationship more than any external opinion. I also learned to trust my instincts more, because from the beginning, I knew Morgan was toxic. I felt it in my bones. But I let Addison minimize my concerns again and again. Next time, if there is a next time, I'm going to set firmer boundaries and I'm not going to compromise them to make my partner happy. Sometimes, at night when I can't sleep, I wonder if Addison thinks about me, if she regrets how she handled everything, if she wishes she could turn back time and make different decisions. We never talked again after that day at Starbucks. There was no need. The lawyers handled everything else. Part of me will always love her, or at least will love the person I thought she was, but I know I could never go back to her. Trust is like a vase. Once it breaks, you can glue it back together, but you'll always see the cracks. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life looking at those cracks, wondering when the next crisis or the next comment from a third party is going to make everything fall apart again. I'm 35 years old. I'm divorced. I live alone in an apartment that's too small and too quiet, and most days I feel okay with that. There are difficult days, sure, days where I see happy couples on the street and feel a pang of envy or sadness for what I lost, but there are also days where I feel free, where I realize I don't have to deal with Morgan's constant drama. I don't have to worry that my wife values her best friend's opinion more than mine. I'm working on rebuilding my life, one piece at a time. And although the process is slow and sometimes painful, I know I'll eventually be okay. The most important thing is that my name is clear, people know the truth, and Morgan is paying the consequences of her actions. It's not perfect justice. Nothing can give me back the years I lost with Addison or erase the pain of those horrible months. But at least I can sleep at night knowing I did everything I could, that I never lied, that I never betrayed anyone, and that in the end, the truth came to light, even if it was too late to save my marriage.